Ready here. Joe Wood is with us in our office, as is Mr. Anderson joining me as well in the NI office. And we have one guest here in attendance at this time. We'll introduce her in just a little bit.
You're set to fly, Mr. Nelson.
You're set to fly? All right. Thank you, Mr. Davis. So once again, thank you, committee members, for making time, in your workday schedules to join us here for an afternoon session. This is a 2 o'clock to 4 o'clock session. I'll go over that here in just a few minutes. But with that, first thing we need to do is call this meeting to order. And noting that, again, we don't have a chair of this committee at this time, I'll take the responsibility. So Donnie Nelson, as the executive director of the NIA, calling the meeting to order at 2:02 p.m. here today. And this is our Rules, Regulations, and Policy Committee. And today is Thursday, January 25th. So we are called to order. At this time, Mr. Joe Wood will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. This is item number 2. Joe, we're going to step over here and you start us and we'll all join in together. I pledge allegiance to the
flag of the United States,
to the republic for which it stands,
for one nation, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
All righty, thank you, Mr. Wood. Going to item number 3, this is the roll call. I will take the lead on this. Mr. Anderson, Paul Anderson. Here. Mr. Reggie Farmer. And Mr. Farmer was just involved with a charter schools meeting, so I think he's making the transition. I think they were just wrapping up there, and I don't know if he's trying to get back to his site, so he'll join us when he gets available. Mr. Cy Frederick.
Here.
Thank you. Tammy Hebig.
Here.
Mr. Todd Hess. Let's see Todd on there.
Here. I'm here, Donnie.
Thank you, sir. Miss Lori Lotz is here. I know she's here. Donnie Nelson, me, here. Miss Kate Zeroy.
Here.
Mr. Ryan Sims.
Here.
Thank you. Miss Pamela Sloan.
Here.
Thank you. Mr. Ron Stallworth. No Ron's yet. Tia, I know you're listening in because you're going to join on public comment. If you would, please, would you text Mr. Stallworth and remind him to jump on, if you would, please? And Mr.
Yes.
Joe Wood. Thank you. Joe's present. Thank you. All right. We'll go to item number 4, approval of our January 25th, 2024 meeting agenda. And this is, of course, for action. We need to approve our agenda today. Do I so kindly have a motion out there, please?
This is Pam. I'll make a motion that we approve the January 25th, 2024 meeting agenda.
Thank you, Ms. Sloan. And may I have a second, please?
This is Kate Segura, I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Roy. Appreciate it. Yeah, any discussion or any other opposition or talk to the agenda? All right. All in favor, if you would, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Anybody opposed to the way the agenda is presented? All right, passes and off we go. Thank you, Mr. Davis, for sharing our agenda on the screen. So we are on YouTube, and I could imagine we probably have a few people joining in to watch with us today. So we will go to public comment. This is item number 5. I'll read the introduction, and then I will discuss. We have 1 letter that's included in the packet. We have 2 other submissions that have come electronically, and we have 1 guest in attendance. So with that said, excuse me, for public comment, this time provides an opportunity for citizens to address the committee about any matter not on the agenda. Items raised during this portion of the agenda cannot be deliberated or acted upon until compliance with those procedures of the open meeting law has been accomplished. Members of the public who wish to speak on a matter not listed on the agenda have been instructed to complete a public comment card here in the office as the home base and submit to myself prior to the opening of an item. Additionally, members of the public who have submitted public comment by email will have their email read into the record. Limit of 3 minutes per person and or 5 minutes for the spokesperson of a group may be imposed. It is requested that comments be directed to the committee as a whole. Comments that are determined to be irrelevant, repetitious, offensive, inflammatory, willfully disruptive, or deemed to be personal attacks will not be permitted. The time limits and restrictions just described will apply to email comments being read into the record as well as live comments. Ms. Wunder from our staff is joining us here today. Tia, if you would be so kind, please, on page number 9, if you would read the author of this letter into the record and then read to the record, and I will start the clock on 3 minutes, please. Thank you.
Okay. Proposed regulation addition / revision. Summary, revises provision governing the Nevada Interscholastic Activities Association, BDR 35-854, NAC 385.024, definition of hardship. Hardship is defined for the purposes of transfer eligibility appeal as an unusual circumstance that, one, is beyond the normal control of a pupil or a parent or legal guardian of the pupil, and two, is not related to participation in a sanctioned sport. NAC 385.024. Unfortunately, unusual is not defined by the NIAA and is based upon the opinion of the NIAA administrator and/or hearing officer. What might be usual for one pupil might be quite unusual for another, especially as it relates to emotional distress. Thus, there's implicit bias by the NIAA staff or hearing officer regarding circumstances that can lead to changes in emotion, thinking, or behavior. The NIAA is not in a position to define what circumstances are unusual for a particular individual that can lead to emotional distress. They also do not review these hardship applications by committee, nor do they have any mental health care professionals on the board. Historically, even if testimony is given by experts in the field as to the reason for the transfer being to improve mental health, this is disregarded in the NIAA's determination of hardship. These circumstances leading to emotional distress can be precipitated by the school environment and is recognized by the International Classification of Diseases, ICD, as an add-on code Z55.8. For example, Z55.8 is added to F43.23, adjustment disorder, with mixed anxiety and depression mood, to classify the distress as being related to the academic or education problems related to education and literacy, and includes inadequate teaching. Another Z code, Z65, can also be added to a specific diagnosis that includes other problems related to psychosocial circumstances and that might occur within or outside the school environment. Both these codes clarify circumstances leading to emotional distress that are not under the control of a pupil, parent, or guardian and should be considered a hardship. Recommendation: add the following under NAC 385.024. An unusual circumstance that satisfies the definition of hardship as it relates to NAC 385.024 may include any circumstance that leads to emotional distress is determined by a physician or mental health care professional licensed within the state of Nevada as the impetus for the student to change schools and is documented as such by the written testimony of that professional.
Thank you, Ms. Wonder. Appreciate that. That is within the time frame as well. Complete.
Okay.
If you would please, then we'll go to letter number 2, and this is one of 2 that we've received electronically here in the last 24 hours, I believe. If you would please.
Okay. This is from Rachel Haverly. Hello, as a parent, I want to give feedback about the NIAA making the registration form too long and complicated for someone on a variance. My son wanted to do welding and metal shop. The school we are zoned for didn't offer that. I did approach admin at our zone school asking if they would bring that into the school. They said not interested. I think if a kid is on a variance and doing a class not offered at their normal school, that should be enough. I think there's too much concern about punishing kids on a variance. If a student has been sexually abused at their zone school or bullied, there should be an automatic variance granted with no repercussions. Also, overcrowding and bad zoning decisions from WCSD can really impact a student not being able to take a class they want to or even get a hot lunch. My older child frequently stood in line forever and never got lunch because there were too many kids. Also, there were a ton of suicides at our zone school, and one of my older son's friends was murdered. It impacted him greatly. I know some students lie, and I know someone who did, but their kid never played a sport, so that was not a conflict. I think that parent lied because of non-sport reasons. It's also confusing because I think the NIAA calls being on a variance a transfer, which is not correct. A transfer is when you were already at another high school and transferred. If your student never attended their zone school, it's a variance. I would like the NIAA to focus on encouraging sports as a healthy focus for kids. NIAA should campaign against vaping and drugs. Vaping is destroying the current generation. One of my concerns of nepotism and corruption are being controlled. You have certain high schools where the major of parents are school employees that live in the zone and their children get special favoritism. and the NIAA encouraged good sportsmanship, and should weigh in when you have situations like at Damani with the black dummy being dragged around behind a horse and beaten. What the heck has that got to do with football? I do not believe parents doing variances for sports is widespread. With high rents and cost of living, most parents are working 2 jobs just to survive. Thank you, R. Haverly.
Good. Thank you, Ms. Wonder. And we will go on to, I believe, the second and final electronic submission we received in the last, again, just within the last 24 hours. Hence why I didn't make it in the packet. Go ahead, please. Thank you.
This is from Courtney Taves. I am writing to address the committee regarding athletic eligibility for children of staff members. I am asking the committee to change the rules to allow the children of staff members who have a proven commitment to their out-of-district school to have first entry or one-time transfer for eligibility to compete at the varsity level beginning this year. I've been a teacher at Incline High School for 18 years and have 2 children, a junior and a freshman. My daughter was denied eligibility during her freshman soccer season due to the fact that we reside in the Tahoe Truckee School District. My son was denied eligibility to run varsity cross country last fall. We do not have complete junior varsity programs at our small school. I appealed the decisions that prohibited both kids from playing varsity and was denied. I feel that all students in similar situations should have the opportunity to play at the highest level in Washoe County. Please change the rules to allow this to happen.
All right, thank you, Ms. Wonder. And I just checked my emails, phone, text messages as well. I have not received any other submissions electronically at this time. We do have one guest in attendance, Dr. Ginger Havenick from Sage Ridge, and it's regards to the I-20 students. Again, one of our subtopics that you see here under agenda item number 6. With due respect to our calendar today and needing to exit at 4 o'clock, not knowing if we will need to continue this or how far we get in this agenda today, I wanted to make sure she had the opportunity to address the committee now, rather than wait till the item, again, not knowing where we might go with this agenda. So, Dr. Havenick, I'm going to turn this laptop around so I can see you. Okay, please. So bear with me for just a second. A little bit of an odd way, but we're in a committee meeting, so let's see if I can get you appropriately on the screen there. There we go. There you go. Dr. Havenick, 3 minutes to address the committee. Thank you.
I'm here to talk about eligibility for I-20 students to play varsity sports. And one of the things that I was able to do is do a lot of research in terms of what states were allowing I-20 students to be able to play. So I gave one example where in Florida, I-20 students are able to play varsity sports, but they have certain types of regulations that go along with that. And then I'm going to send that electronically to Mr. Nelson, this afternoon. But they're asking that they maintain a cumulative GPA of 2.0, that they must not have graduated from any high school or its equivalent, that they must not be enrolled in the 9th grade for the first time more than 8 consecutive semesters. So there's a whole piece that goes along with that describes that more fully. And then that they must start school within a 10-day period of time when school starts. And then there's a whole description that goes up under that. That they must undergo participation in physical evaluation and be certified. They must have signed permission to participate from the student's parents or guardian. And then there's a form that's also filled out, and they must be an amateur. So I thought that I would bring some ideas to the Rules and Regulation Commission in terms of the kinds of things that were being allowed in another state. And then I also provided a great deal of other information in terms of what is a I-20 student and how that relates to F1 versus a J1 student, which is a foreign exchange student, and they're only there for 1 year. So not sure, I'm just trying to engage in a conversation to find out what kinds of ways that it might be possible for I-20 international students to be able to play, that also fits the regulations within NIAA to be able to allow them to play. So that's all I wanted to say, to start, continuing that conversation and providing some additional information for you that it might be considered for these students to be able to play. I also put in a couple paragraphs about recruiting, that how that fits in and that recruiting is not allowed and what are the parameters of what is the definition of recruiting. So I wanted to include that as well. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. All right, everybody bear with me for just a second when I flip around the talker. And again, to Dr. Hovnick, what you will, let me get back in front of the camera here just a second. And what I've received here is a hard copy of a packet, 8 pages from Dr. Hovnick, and it's regards to the FHSAA, Florida High School Athletic Association. It addresses definitions and then addresses their policy 17. So I will forward that on to you when I receive that electronically, so you'll be able to see that for a next possible discussion. Okay. With that, let's go any other sites. Anybody ever received any other public comments? All right, going once, going twice. Thank you. All right, that said, we'll go to item number 6 then, please. And we've got a lot to discuss here. So, you know, I'll make some personal commentary first here. When I first started in April 1998, the NIA consisted of a membership of 77 schools, 8 of which were non-traditional public schools. We're at 123 schools now. And we can owe quite a bit of the increases, obviously, to the creation of charter schools and also joining the association a handful of small enrollment private schools. Why we're here today is to be transparent in my communications with various people at the state legislature. I'm assuming a lot of you remember what was about to come to the association and maybe be dictated to the association with regards to a transfer rule. A Senate bill that was ultimately defeated, probably with regards to some people who understanding the NIA and have been involved in the NIA in the past, and were able to, I think, convince their colleagues to let the NIA look at this on its own accord, give the association the due time, you know, between the sessions to come up with something. So we're going to have some pretty big time philosophical discussions today, and again, with that, be very transparent. I would say that the NIA has been warned based on the last legislation session and recent communications that action is needed to revise our transfer rules. Excuse me. And if the NIA is not cognizant or maybe lacks amending some regulations here in the near future, I think that could result in something along the lines of the NCAA transfer report. Now, again, this is my personal commentary. This is not in writing somewhere. It's just not a threat. It's just we need to be prepared for what might come at us because the world is a little bit different than the way it used to be. Right, wrong, or different. So with that, we'll start by looking at open enrollment first. Separate and apart from that, we'll look at a one-time transfer rule, a free transfer. We'll also get into discussing I-20 students and how residency requirements should or should not apply to transfers with those students. After that, we'll shift gears and go after 3 other topics, looking at the development of a co-op team rule. We'll talk about team member participant requirements to be included, not just really for realignment purposes and counting full teams, but really for membership purposes. And I'll explain more of that later again when we get to that item. We'll also talk about post-game bench clearing. That's always been a concern of mine. And again, personal commentary is that I always worry about the fact that a losing team could influence the outcome of a double forfeit or possibly a playoff bracket if they wanted to cause chaos after a game. And we understand that, and that's come up before in commentary with different meetings. And lastly, as you've heard in recent board meetings, some commentary about hardship and our definition of hardship and how that applies. So we'll look at if we want to consider redefining hardship. Again, this is a discussion meeting today only. Once we get through these various items within agenda number 6, we'll look at coming back, perhaps bringing some things in return for more concrete discussions, possibly get to the point where we're actually creating regulations for proposals. There's a lot to go through, and this committee is going to take a real big lead in the topics that we have here for today for discussion. So a little lay of the land in the handbook, or excuse me, in our packet real quick. Excuse me. Pages 11 and 12 list the applicable handbook regulations that if we need to reference them. You know, those links are hyperlinks in there in your hard copy packet, your electronic packet. As pages 11 and 12 really identify the first three topics we're going to talk about. Pages 13 through 15 include some basic and some sample language about a first entry. I'll get into that later. Page 16 is meant to give us a starting point for a philosophical discussion about a one-time free transfer, even after a possible open enrollment process. Pages 17 and 18 are with regards to our foreign exchange and foreign student regulations, the I-20 item. Page 19 is some language about co-ops. Page 20 is about our team numbers. Again, I'll explain why that's in here and what that's all about. Pages 21 through 23 are our current bench clearing regulations. And finally, page 24 in the packet contains our definition for hardship. So with that, let's flip through to page 13, please. Let's get right after this. Excuse me, I ate something right before here, and it seems to not want to sit in my throat very well. So I apologize the clearing in my throat. 2.5 years ago, we did a first survey with our membership to principals, athletic administrators, athletic directors about interest in creating a first entry, a one-time transfer. A year ago, we did our second survey. Question number 1 in that second survey from about a year ago at this time was, the question was, a student who legitimately enrolls in a school for the first time in 9th grade should be fully varsity eligible regardless of zone of attendance and or specialized program. Again, this was meant to be a scientific question. It was to gauge interest. 2 years ago, the answer was 82% of respondents were in favor of a one-time first entry. And this last time, the second survey, 78.3% were in favor of that. So what I'm going to do by leading into some discussion first, and I'll go around the room here and call on some people to give some input after I review things. My first thoughts are, if we do decide to pursue this, right? That's if we decide to pursue this. How do we keep it simple, right? How do we write something that makes sense? Second concern is, how will our larger enrollment districts be able to accommodate such a new regulation? And that goes with regards to seat availability, and also possibly, you know, what would be a deadline to register in Clark County or Washoe County or Elko County or whatever. Conceptually, how do we tie this into our current homeschool regulation? How do we tie it into our charter school mentions with NACs, right? I mean, certainly I know we're all in the boat of supporting our student athletes. The concept of school choice is often prevalent around our state. How do we help students living in one district attend another district, right? We have that right now, where we have families in one part, but they've sent, for whatever reasons, their son or daughter to go to another school, which actually is located in their district. Maybe it's because mom and dad have a job at another school in another district. Or maybe they've seen other curriculum that they want to do in their district. So this addresses this as well. The superintendents have made commentary on this before as well. Along all of this, right, is right now we have some regulations that have students who can't start in some kind of a different or specialized program, different district, and they get sub-varsity eligibility. Clearly, this discussion about a first entry initial eligibility and open enrollment is about varsity eligibility for the get-go. So again, we're not talking about a one-time transfer here. We're just talking about a first entry. Okay, that's how we're going to start here today on page 13. So the language I have for you, again, pages 13 through 15, I've just put some conceptual language in here. This is derived from what neighboring state associations have. I haven't put their regulations because, as you can imagine, when you write regulations, it's more specific. But this is some summaries, and there's many different types of ways to look at this thing, right? If I look at the second paragraph here, and I won't read it to you on page 13, you know, people has graduated from the 8th grade and is enrolling in the 9th grade for the first time, may attend any member school, right? But then we also have to consider, what about those schools that don't have athletic programs? What about those schools that have athletics but don't have a specific sports program? How does that happen? How do we have a student make sure that their grades or their reporting academic progress report is with a school that they may not attend? Or do we even worry about that? So again, you got some language on page 13. If I switch over to page 14, again, I'm almost ready to open it up to everybody here, some commentary. Go to page 14. In my humble opinion, The age rule that you see at the top of page 14 is also in association with a first entry rule. And the reason being is that I understand we have districts that are starting to see students be held back in 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade. In my interpretation, possibly for the benefit of being older, stronger, for athletic purposes, before they start their normal track from kindergarten on into high school athletics. So if we do consider to go this way, we want to consider it more. I would also hope that we consider the age rule changing from 20 to 19, where you can't turn 19 during a season and be able to start that season. So again, that's my personal commentary. Also on page 14, again, some other dialogue, some minimal type of discussion items. And finally, we wrap it up on page 15 with some very loose commentary on dual enrollment district at Turner School. So I'm going to tell you out loud here, there are people in this committee, in this room, much smarter than I am. My goal here is to try and get this association focused on something if it wants to, because the legislative session is not all that far away, and perhaps we need to make progress sooner than later, or not. And, you know, as a committee and as an association, we have to wait and see what comes at us. So with that said, I want to ask some questions, and you can each take a couple minutes if you want to, about do we want to pursue this? And if so, Donnie, here's some direction, or committee, here's some direction. I'm going to start with the president of our board, Ms. Pamela Sloan. Pam, I'm going to turn you over for a couple minutes. And again, this is a discussion. It's wide open. You can say anything you want. Go for it, please.
You know, Donnie, I appreciate you opening up for me, first of all, but because we are so limited for time, I would really like to turn it over to Kate. Kate is the individual that does athletic eligibility in my office for Clark County and is engulfed in this. And I would really like to, again, thank you, but I would really like to hear what Kate has to say.
And thank you, Ms. Sloan. Kate was next. You were second on my list. So let's go right to it. Go ahead.
Thanks. So when we're looking just at first entry, a couple things, and I know this is just kind of a hodgepodge of different pieces of language, but the things that really stick out to me and are important in if we do go in this direction and write something is the language needs to be tight. There can't be loopholes. So one of the first things that, you know, jumps off the page to me is anywhere where it says may attend any member school. I think we need to be very careful. And if we are writing this, that it states the school that you are enrolled in, right? The first paragraph there is a little bit more specific, where it says your school of enrollment is defined as yada, yada, yada. We need to make sure our language is something of that nature, because we don't want to give the impression that you can attend any school that you want and then play sports at any other school, or that you can also just go to any school without any other, you know, stipulations like a lottery for a charter, or, you know, the seat availability at a public school. Like we have our COSA program, which is its own variant. So there needs to be something in there that states that you are legitimately enrolled at that school through whatever process that particular school has for you to be able to go there. That also brings up, you know, my concern with how those students are attending those schools. So are they able to attend any school? And then are we ignoring other regulations such as temporary guardians, shared housing, residential affidavit type programs, you know, living with the wrong guardian? So again, it has to be a legitimate enrollment at that school to start with, and then be very cognizant of how we are talking about their way of getting to that school. Because in my opinion, those things still need to exist. They still can't go to a school on a temporary guardianship, because then it's just going to be athletically motivated and very hard to prove if they're allowed to just go to that school on a temporary guardian, and we don't have a rule against that. So I think it's important we keep many of our existing transfer rules and enrollment rules that we have, so that we don't fall into a bunch of loopholes that people are finding, because they find them, and will exploit us for that. I also have a lot of concern with if we were to add something about pupils being able to choose whatever school that they would like to participate in if they are enrolled in a school program that doesn't offer sports. Because the thing I see here is every student in our area down here is going to go to a homeschool program, and then they're just going to choose whatever school that they want, and that's going to be a free-for-all. I think it's going to be very difficult for us also to manage and track that when it's not linked to their zone of attendance where they live. So I'm very much against adding anything that has to do with being able to choose the school that they wish to participate in. Other things that I have on first entry, I think I actually hit them all on this. Let me see if there's anything that's on the second page here. Oh, the age. So I am definitely in support of making that change to the age down to 19. I think that will help in some ways our issue that we're seeing. And I know here in Clark County, we definitely are seeing an issue with students that are repeating in middle school at some point. I don't necessarily think it's going to fully fix the issue because most of them are just being held 1 year. And that is not going to, unless they were held back at some point in a younger year or started school late, they're still not going to turn 19 in their senior year, even being held back. A lot of times it won't, happen until either later in that year or even into the summer. So I definitely still have concerns about that issue, which is kind of separate from this with students being held back, which I can discuss at a later time. Some of the other language on here, I think, if we are going to put students have to be enrolled by a certain date, we also need to be cognizant of late acceptance into certain programs. In our district, we have late acceptance into our zone variance program, into, and then I know some charter schools may have that as well for wait lists. So that's just kind of another point. If we're going to have that, there may need to be some stipulation about late acceptance. I think that's mostly my thoughts on first entry. I am personally in support, as long as the language is very tight.
Thank you, Mr. Goy. That was a comprehensive report, and I appreciate that very much. I know the committee appreciates that very much. Not speaking on behalf of everybody, but this is what we need to get into. Superintendent Todd Hess, I'd like to have you, assuming you're still on there, I just have the ability to reach over and scroll down real quick on the screen. But if you would, from the superintendent's perspective, or maybe just Story County's perspective, because you, as I made that comment earlier, right? We have districts that are close by, and that do have parents or guardians working in a district in which their pupils not necessarily reside, but still come to that district. So, Mr. Hess, comments from you.
Well, first of all, thank you so much, and thanks to the entire committee for willing to talk about some of these issues here. Of course, when we talk about Western Nevada, you have Washoe, Lyon, Story, Clark Douglas, gosh, even Churchill, that are pretty close to each other. And we're all very good as a superintendent group of, allowing students to variance to places that, as Donnie was saying, might be places where their parents work or just a better fit for them. Our particular case and story that we've talked about for is, and also go ahead and say it, we're very much in favor of the first entry rule. I haven't talked with any superintendent that wasn't in favor of it. They either don't have an opinion or they're in favor of it. We have quite a few students in Story County that are K-8 from another district. When they enroll as a freshman, they're considered under a transfer from where exactly, and this is no shade to the end. I think what Donnie and done is absolutely superb. And one of the with that is, in small schools, in the 1A and the 2A, there's just a lot of sports that we just don't offer sub-varsity spots for that. So I know Lyon County has the same thing. There's a little bit of that in Lincoln County, and I think the survey certainly bears that out. And I agree with the last person that spoke about that spoke far better than I am right now. We want this language to be tight, and we don't want there to be we want it to be done for the right reason and not for any reason that's would lead to someone trying to take advantage of this. So again, I appreciate everybody for being on this committee, and look forward to hearing everybody's perspective. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Hess. Again, I'm sorry I don't have the ability to drop down the arrow real quick. Mr. Stallworth, did you join?
Yes.
Okay, Rollins, if you would please, from the Washoe County perspective, you heard Mr. Goy talk about a Clark County perspective, and and comments. Obviously, you heard from Mr. Hess and his comments. Washoe County's perspective on a first entry, and what your district may or may not think about this.
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank Kate for such a thorough and in detailed research on this. You can tell someone who works on this on a daily basis and has that insight. And Kate, I really appreciate that. And I know that Paula here echoes your sentiments and your questions and comments as well. My biggest question on this, just specifically talking about the first entry rule, is it going to be specific enough to address this issue? Are we talking about a first entry rule of a freshman going into the high school? Or is it the first entry of any kid that moves into Washoe County and is going to come to our county for the first time and enter a Washoe County School District school and participate in athletics? For example, I move into Washoe County as a junior. My parents were coming here for the first time. We move into Zone A of the district, but I want to go to School B. It's my first time entry into Washoe County, into the state of Nevada. Does this first time entry rule apply to me as it does a freshman student coming in? Or am I obligated as an incoming junior moving into this area? Am I obligated to go to the school where my parents have moved to?
Mr. Stahl, I can answer that question for you on the intent of this. Thank you. That's a great question. And the intent of this here on pages 13 through 15 is for 9th grade first starting place only, okay?
Well, then
However, the answer to your question is both yes and yes, because when we get to discussion on the one-time transfer rule, I actually have some ideas in there about just that, right? Somebody comes from out of state in a sophomore, junior, senior year, or out of district or something like that, and then they go, well, I'm gonna use my one-time transfer to not go to the school for which I'm residentially zoned in a public situation and want to go to school B. So they kind of go hand in hand, but the intent for this first and foremost is for 9th grade students, okay?
But dial. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, but we will talk about that part. Anything else, Mr. Stallworth?
That's still confusing.
That's why we're talking about, that's why we're discussing. What do we need to be aware of, right?
Okay, all righty.
Very eloquently outlined for us.
Thanks.
All right. Cy Frederick, a private school athletic administrator.
Yeah, I don't
Again,
have
first integral, not a major factor for private schools in what we start already, but just want to hear your comments, any concerns that you might have on from your perspective.
Thanks, Donnie. Yeah, I don't have a ton to say just because it doesn't affect private schools as much. I think collectively on the first entry rule and, probably as we go forward through a lot of this stuff, the important thing to keep in mind too is, I think we, as Kate was saying, very thoroughly, is that we want the language to be tight. And I think if we go a certain route and we do our best to keep the language tight and somebody finds a loophole, that doesn't mean the language wasn't tight. It just means that you can't policy out everything and things happen. And so you don't want to let perfect be the enemy of good. You want to just kind of try to do what we can do in regards to what's happening most in our state and trying to do what's right by the kids and do what's right by the kids that aren't trying to take advantage of the system. And so that's the only thing I would say about with all this stuff is just, I think that's the kind of overarching motto we have to kind of keep in our minds. But thanks for letting me talk.
No, that's wonderful, Mr. Frederick. Thank you. I appreciate your comments very much. Mr. Farmer, I don't know if Reggie made it back from the previous meeting, or again, I'm sorry, I don't have the ability to scroll down real quick here. Reggie, are you on there?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Welcome, sir. Good to see you again. Long time no see.
Thank you. I was here. I was just on the wrong feed. I was here on the
excellent.
other side, but I'm here and thank you for having me again.
Yeah, thank you, sir. So again, representing a charter school, again, one school, right? I know you're not representing the entire body of the charter schools, and Mr. Henneman can help as we go through the charter school liaison for our board. But anyway, from your side of things, Mr. Farmer, Any impact, any commentary on how charter schools fit into this with zone for public schools and private schools?
Well, kind of, again, like kind of what Mr. Frederick said, we're not going to be able to policy out everything, and we really have to do what's best for kids in this situation. People are going to cheat and figure out ways around things, and we got to do our best to rein in what we can rein in. But as far as the charter schools go, you know, I could have a 6'5", 230-pound right-handed pitcher that lives across the street, and if I don't have a seat, he can't get in. Like, we have a lottery system. I have 300 freshman seats, and when those 300 seats are filled, everybody goes on a waiting list, and you get in when or if you get in. But I am in favor of this rule. I think it helps kids. It helps families that have situations that sometimes are beyond their control, and it helps people. But again, like everybody else is saying, if we can get that language as tight as possible to try to avoid some of the madness that parents will pull, then that's great too. So that's all.
Thank you, Mr. Farmer-Giddy. You kind of reiterated, right, that at some point, districts, schools can always have more restrictive standards than our administrative codes. And at some point, we may have districts and schools that say, we just don't have seat for you, family A. I'm sorry. Thank you for wanting to take an opportunity, but it doesn't exist, right? And so we think about the possible cause and effect, and maybe it is or maybe it is not as negative as it could be when students start somewhere, because it might all balance itself out anyway. If there's any basic perceptions that are not correct.
Yeah, 100%. And we have so many seats per grade level, and that's that. Like, we don't have, there's never going to be portables. We're never going to add more. We are capped, and that's how most charter schools run. We are capped at a number. And when we hit that number, everybody else goes to the waiting list. And if you're 183 on the waiting list, you got to wait for 182 kids to move out of your way, and then you get in. So it is what it's going to be when it comes to that.
Thank you, sir.
Yes.
We will, let's wrap up with a few more, and let's go with Ryan Sims. You're in an area of the Truckee Meadows that has some highly competitive schools right around each other. And, you know, what does this do from the side of trying to, I'm going to say it politically correct, trying to attract students that may want to go to your school rather than another school that might be nearby that, you know, might have a different take on its athletic program. Ryan Sims. Well, did we lose you, Ryan? Oh, I thought I saw you in there. Okay, that's okay. Well, if Mr. Sims comes back.
Okay, I'm right here. Is that better?
Oh, there we go. Hi, Ryan. Yeah,
All
come
right,
on in. Anything you want to say to this
Thank you, Donnie. Yeah, I'm at Reed High School in Sparks, Nevada. You know, when I was invited to be a part of this committee and looking at some of these rule changes, you know, I asked myself, you know, why is the current rule in place? You know, we really need to answer that and reflect on that. And why are we considering change? Are we considering change for a few kids, the minority number, or are we changing it for the majority, you know, to help the majority? I worry about things with first-time enrollment when it comes to school culture. I worry about school spirit. You know, kids grow up in a zoning area wearing blue and gold from 5 years old and looking forward to, you know, going to a particular school with their friends. And, you know, with first-time enrollment, I'm going to be influenced in every way that's out there. You know, when it comes to NIL, you know, being offered things from other schools. And we're going to create powerhouses in Washoe County, and we're going to have essentially CTE is going to be career tech, ed, and sports. And Reed's going to be the football school, and Spanish Springs is going to be the softball school. I just worry about, you know, kids transferring and not caring about the actual school they go to, that they're going to play sports. And is that what education-based athletics is all about? You know, should we have a sense of pride, school spirit, loyalty, you know, we're gonna lose all of that. You can see it in college football that is now pro football. So I'm a fan of status quo where we're at. But I look forward to learning from all of you and hearing different reasons why and why we should make change.
Thank you, Mr. Sims. Again, a wonderful perspective, right? We have lots of great dialogue going on already about one topic that could be written very easily, possibly by rule, and maybe not. Two more to go, and then we'll jump on to another item or ask for some direction from there. Mr. Wood, anything from Churchill County side of representing? And you're a school in a district that is not quite there where you're going to see any of
Right,
this.
we don't really have that issue, I don't think. We do have the issue of, we have a charter school in our district, and so a lot of our kids that choose to go to that charter school, they don't offer things like football, Mr. Sims was just talking about, and so they get to come play football for us because that's already how the rule is. So we don't really see the things, and I've been in Las Vegas, I know how things are a little bit down there. And you have thousands and thousands and thousands of kids trying to manage that, where we have just over 1,000 kids. So we don't really see the same kind of issues here in Churchill.
And one more, Ms. Habig, you obviously serving as a liaison on our board and representing our 4A, 5A Southern schools. I can only imagine how many times you get asked this from your colleagues on a daily basis, but you know, what's the scuttlebutt out there about the possible viewing of a first entry initial eligibility open enrollment group?
So I guess maybe I'm kind of glad I went last, because listening to other people's comments have brought up some good points and some questions. I guess I'm one of those people that tries, like he said, to look at, are we changing it for the majority, for the minority? Why are we changing it? I guess my impression of what first time enrollment was, and I don't want to, for lack of a better term, I guess free for all is what I understood it to be. Like, we're not going to question you. We're not going to understand. We're not going to care how you got to where you got. We're just going to let you enroll where you want to enroll as a freshman, and then that's your school. So I guess I'm kind of confused, because then I listen to like Kate, which deals with this day in, day out all the time. If we have to be so specific on the language, why would we have a open? Why would we have it? Why would we not go for something different? Because if you're going to have it so strict and the wording, I guess, and I understand what she's saying, because she's 1000% right when she says we're going to have a lot of kids go homeschool, and then they're going to be like, oh, I'm going to go play, in our case, I'm going to go play Centennial, I'm going to go play, anywhere and go to homeschool. So I totally understand what she's saying. I guess I just don't understand that if we're going to redo it, why would we do it so strict?
Yeah, Tammy, that's a great question, right? I would say that there are other states that free for all is probably the right word, right? It's just, we don't care anything. You start day one, wherever you live, is whoever you live with, we don't care. That is where you establish it, and we move forward from there. That is it. No background. So, right, that's why we're having this discussion. And obviously, people listening from the outside going, oh boy, I realize all the different perspectives that are associated. It's not just that easy to say, go day one. Or could it be as easy as day one? And if we do, what kind of chaos does that create for our schools and our districts, let alone our families, right? You've heard with Ryan's comments, and boy, so yeah, to tie it up, right? Well, I know we want to make sure we get into some other topics here. And so if I ever get to wrap this
up. Donnie,
yes.
This is Pam. I would really like to hear from Lori Lotz. I think she needs to be part of the conversation and give her perspective, being that she does eligibility for the NIAA.
Yeah, Miss Lotz, are you able to? I don't want to say something I don't want you to say. I know Lori was having a very rough day and not feeling well. Lori, are you able to join?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, but and Lori, sorry for doing it, but I just want to make people understand. So anyway, go ahead, Lori, if you would, please.
I agree kind of with everybody and I understand all the perspectives. At this point, I think I've been in favor of a first entry rule. If the school is going to enroll you, then you can participate there as a freshman. Beyond that, I think if we start getting into a one-time transfer, I think it's going to create a lot of headache for at least a few years. And we'll see one of two things. Either it's going to play itself out. Families are going to realize, hey, look, I'm not going to get any playing time there. I might as well go here, go back to my zone school. Or we're going to see our schools coming back going, whoa, wait a minute, this is bad experiment. We need to go back. We need to bring back our rules. Until we go down the road, I don't think we're necessarily going to see which path it's going to happen in our state. I do agree wholeheartedly with Kate that whatever we do, we need to make sure our language is tight. We want to give the benefit of the doubt to people, but they find a way around everything. So I'm not sure how we can do that. And I also agree with Cy that we can't keep trying for perfection at our language and losing sight of what's important, and it's the participation of our student athletes.
Thank you, Lori. Any other commentary before I wrap up this particular sub item?
I do have one question.
Yes, sure. Fine.
And what Lori said just kind of brought it up was, so are these the first entry and the one-time transfer sort of in opposition of each other? Like you can't have both, is that what I'm hearing? Or one feeds into the other. If you have first entry and not one time, then it's just the kids choosing from day one. Whereas if you have one-time transfer and not first entry, okay, they start wherever they have to start, and then they're just going to transfer after that. So like, are they just there would never be a case where you'd have both. Is that what I'm hearing?
Thank you, Mr. Frederick. Let me try and throw this out as eloquently as possible. The intent for these two items, based on the commentary to me personally from a few people, on the Senate and Assembly side, are number one, look at consider, doesn't mean you have to, but consider a first entry as to Tammy's regards, free and clear of anything and everything, right? Now, that's way out there. We've heard commentary, what our rules and regulations are. Kate addressed that, but it is look at it. And then the second part of that is a one-time transfer after a first entry. So in addition to, separate and apart from. We're going to get into that next, right? So no, it's not meant to be, you can only have this one and they're one and the same. And if you start somewhere that's out of your zone, that is your one-time transfer. No, it's NIA consider, start wherever the heck you want. How do districts and schools figure that out? Seats and all that, that's a whole nother thing. People don't care about that. That's your problem to figure out. We're just going to tell you what we want you to consider. And then, which again, that may be the perfect segue into part B, is after that, wherever somebody starts on day one, however open and free it is, then if it doesn't work out at that school first entry and they go, you know what, I tried to go here, this wasn't my normal public zone first school, I wanted to go for this program, or whatever reason is truthful or not truthful, I want to be able to go back somewhere else because we made a mistake as a family, I made a mistake as a student, it just didn't work out. I'm not going to talk about playing time and all that. That's all perceptions. But what do we do next? So if it's okay with everybody, let's transfer into, before I talk about where we're going to go next with part A, let's transfer into part B. Paul, anything that I'm missing on this that you want to commentary, or we go to Pitco?
On what?
On a first entry. Just anything?
First entry.
Yeah.
No, I wanted to bring up that point. First entry and one-time transfer rule being both in effect I think, we do that, there's gonna be a free-for-all, I believe, in terms of transfers around the state, and particularly to certain schools. I think a lot of this is being driven in people's minds by what's happened at the collegiate level. And what people have to keep in mind and remember at the high school level is that we're an education-based organization. We have specific regulations that say once you enter school, you have 8 consecutive semesters in 4 years in which to complete your eligibility. There's no such thing as a red shirt. College now, you see 7th year seniors playing various sports, due to medical hardships or, and transferring 2 or 3 times depending upon the portal rules. So if you give 2 transfers in a 4-year period, I think that's really opening some things up, but that's for discussion by the group here. I also believe, as the attorney that handles the level 2s, we've seen a significant increase in the number of cases in the last 2 years. And, I'm in favor of looking at a first entry rule. I'm in favor of looking at a one-time transfer rule. I don't know that I'm in favor of both going together. And I also believe the end result, if you have either or both together, is at some point in time, what you're going to see is exactly what we're still seeing, and that's transfers for whatever the reason happens to be. And one of them, I think, will be, a lack of playing time and whatnot, because everyone's going to want to go to a certain school, and there's only so many spots on each team. So, just those are my thoughts.
Thank you, Paul. Well, then let's transition over to page 16, if we would, please. And so again, we're going to leave a whatever first entry means. We're going to look at one-time transfer. So this is only one page, some very simple language. This is how it all started, right? I mean, the first entry came in lieu of or in addition to what is really coming at us, I believe, and not written anywhere, not being forced on us at this point, not threatened to us. But what I truly believe from people who are telling me in person, Donnie, the NIA needs to get ready for this, because there is conceptual language about, the NCAA transfer portal, and something along the lines of, why doesn't the NIA just have a rule that as long as a student changes schools prior to June 15th for the upcoming school year, why can't they just do that? Why can't they just go? Why couldn't you then have at least the opportunity to play at 3 different schools in 4 years? Now, you had a first entry also, that could be 4 different schools in 4 years, right? Or if you're zone 4, you can still move, it could still be one the same. So what I've got in here are to address a few things. The top of page 16, again, just some conceptual language, that's it. Cutting and pasting on the second paragraph there from another state. This also addresses the concept of a second or a subsequent transfer after a first transfer, in that do you look at a roster exception that a student played a sport in the last 12 months only, or do you look at a student might have played and participated in a sport at any time during his or her career, regardless of the last 12 months or not, and then you can't transfer a second time, regardless if that name appeared on a roster? Or again, so here's an example. We have probably 49 of the 51 state associations that have, in essence, some form of you are good to go, full varsity eligibility to go play another sport that you already played at a previous school, free and clear, no questions asked. Sometimes that penalty is half the season. So that restricts it a little bit. Most of the time, it's just, have you played it in the last 12 months? So an example that came up in our NFHS winter meeting was a state that's starting this year. A state has a first entry, free and clear, just like what Tammy said, and how you start wherever you want, doesn't matter anything, just go day one. The NIA would have nothing to do with any business anywhere else except for from day one. Then, if the student does not play a fall sport, but plays a winter sport, the student could actually transfer prior to the spring season, before the first competitive day on the calendar of the spring season, and go play a spring season sport and be eligible. And that would be, in addition to a first entry for the state, that is your one-time transfer. However, even beyond that, after the spring season, if they want to go to another school because they didn't play a fall sport, they could actually do that and be eligible in that fall sport at school 3 within 3 semesters. But then they couldn't transfer again to play a winter sport or a spring sport that previously was on a roster somewhere else. And then they would be out 180 school days in those sports, period, end of story. So again, I'm not trying to confuse people here. I'm saying a lot. In my mind, I'm processing how these other states are doing it. There are a lot of really open, a lot of open concepts that are going on right now, and for the most part, they're legislatively driven. So if you look a little further about a one-time transfer, again, let's say a student after 2 full years at a school, junior year, says, I want to now go play sports A, B, and C, all 3 seasons in a different school, right? That in a one-time transfer, that would be permitted, but then couldn't go again after that. Owing to the fact that what about residency rules? Well, clearly the one-time transfer, you're moving from a public to a charter to a private to a public to a private. All anything and everything that can happen. It really doesn't matter. You can just go so long as your name hasn't appeared on a roster for more than 1 school previously. That's it. Now, what states are, and we're in the infancy of this across the nation, right? There are states that have done this for a while, but for the most part, a lot of states are just doing this right now. They're starting up. They're in year 1 or 2 of this process. And what they're trying to find out, and we don't have answers to that yet, is number 1, does it take down hardship appeals? Does it make it easier on people? The intent wasn't designed to make things easier on people, like in the CCSD office, the WCSD office, the NIA office. It wasn't that. But the question is, when you put a limit to it, you can just go somewhere, period, fine, go, just submit it. It's an automatic granted hardship. Does that take away the number of transfers and number of appeals? Because other states have a lot of the same rules, used to have a lot of the same rules that we do. So, okay, I know I muddy the waters a whole lot. I tried to keep this real simple on page 16, just again for the conceptual language. So, Kate, I'm gonna have you go towards the end of this one if you don't mind that. I would like to do that. I'm gonna start off with Mr. Frederick, from a private school. And again, not representing all private schools. That's not size role, but Mr. Frederick, what do you think about a one-time free and clear, no questions asked?
I guess I don't have a ton of solidified thoughts on it yet. I think I have more questions than I have thoughts. One of my first questions would be sort of about the 180 days, that amount, that number, right? I mean, that seems like just off the cuff, a happy medium of how to address sort of both parties of people who don't agree with one-time transfer or do agree with one-time transfer. Maybe the answer lies somewhere in that amount of days that a kid has to sit out. If there was a rule on transferring, but it didn't mean you had to miss the whole season, does that lessen the opinions people have on transfers? I'm super curious about that question you asked about, does it make things easier? Because for myself and my athletic office, I guess if it's wrong to think this, but that is a big deal to me, right? It is a big deal of making things easier for my staff and myself, right? Transfers are not easy. They're very complicated. Everyone is different. And, if it weren't for Lori, we'd be I'd walk into the woods at this point, right? Because it's just, they're very complicated and they're not easy to handle. And you have every sob story in the book coming through about, with kids, and you want to help them, right? We all got into the position we're in to help kids. And so when you get a kid who's like, honest to goodness, just wants to play basketball, it's a difficult thing, right? You have to kind of to walk through. But so I'm very curious about that question. Does it, where the states that are doing it, has it lessened the workload for them? And then, the other part of this that I think is very interesting is, if you allow a one-time transfer, in my opinion, like I said before already, in my opinion, that sort of negates the need or the severity of a first entry rule. Because if a kid is going to first entry, or if a kid can't go wherever they want to go, they just need to wait the year or wait however long they need to wait to transfer. And then to me, there's less, I think there'd be less opinion on first entry rule. Just kind of makes sense. And then the other way around too. I guess, like I said, I don't have a bunch of eloquent thoughts formed on it yet. I have more questions than anything.
Yeah, thank you, Simon, and I do as well. Right, sitting in my position, I do. I want to make it very clear to anybody out there. I personally, in my title, my role of association, I am not saying I favor one thing or the other, right? But I have to. I feel like the responsibility to bring these things up to help the association understand what may be out there that may be out of our control if we don't at least consider this and tell people, yes, we are looking at this, right? Because we may or may not be behind the times what other states are doing, and that's what's driving all this, is what's happening around us, right? And the 50% of a season, half the games, we'll get into that too a little bit later as well. So, and along this, before I call on somebody else here, next person, along the lines too, what states are doing is with a one-time transfer, it is not automatic sub-varsity only. And the reason being is because they're seeing schools that obviously don't field lower level programs, right? We all, some of us in small school around deal with that on a regular basis. The schools that field the lower level program, we got an opportunity to go play sub-varsity. We don't have sub-varsity, so what good did it do us? Most of these states are full varsity level eligible. So again, that's what I'm understanding, that interest from the outside might say, this isn't about sub-varsity NIA, this is about varsity. So anyway, with that, Reggie, I'm gonna go to you this time second. Again, from a charter school. Just thoughts, right? I'm just
just thoughts. I have a lot of thoughts, and but I do want to get. I do want to hear where everybody else is coming from, and maybe why I might be missing the boat on this thing. To me, I'm an athlete. I don't know. I'm not going to go into my whole background, but I was a professional athlete. I was drafted out of high school and college, and I played in D1 and the whole thing. And so when I'm looking at this through my lens as somebody that was lucky enough to go to a school that fit my needs. I went to a school that had great coaches. I had what I needed to get me drafted and to get me. And then I look at other situations where, we have to be honest, not every coach is a great coach. Not every situation for our athletes is the right situation for them. So I shouldn't be penalized as a kid because of the zip code that I live in, and that person that was hired at that high school is who I've stuck with for 4 years. There are people out there that they coach and they're great for watching the kids for 2 hours, but they're not going to help those kids who want to get to the next level get to the next level. So I'm trying to look at it as, how do we come together and do this thing so that people are in the place where they need to be? Are we going to have people that I didn't get to play here, so now I like this coach, I want to go play there? And we're going to have people trying to do that wherever we go. One thing that I do like that I kind of saw in here as I was talking this with my daughter played at Arborview a few years ago, and we were kind of talking through some situations, and I don't like the idea of just an all-out free-for-all, but I like the idea of people not being restricted and stuck in a situation. So that option C, where I might have to miss half the games if I go somewhere. It's not 180 days. We're not killing a kid's career and making them miss a whole season. But you got to sit out sometime, and there is a penalty. You and your family have to decide if missing half a season is worth the move versus, you know, a death penalty to me of 180 days. Because if I transfer as a sophomore, I have to sit out my senior year, and then my senior year, I twist my ankle in the first game of the season, and I got to miss 4 weeks. My career is over. Like I haven't got to show people what I'm capable of doing. So I'm kind of resting. My mind was kind of resting on that option C type of thing. I'm glad you actually have that on there to not just kill a kid's career, but to maybe provide opportunities. And again, I'm not talking about the people who are going to cheat no matter what we do. Those people who are going to go out and find and try to be recruited or sell themselves. I'm not talking about those people. But those kids who, again, as I said, that are just, they want to just play the sport and be a part of something. I hope that we can provide them an avenue to do that. So I'm with allowing these kids to transfer that one time. But again, maybe you only play 50% of the games, the second 50%, the playoffs, whatever. But there has to be some penalty. But I think 180 days that's a lot. That's my point.
Donnie, I would like to make a little comment based on Mr. Farmer's comments.
Yes, sir. Go ahead, Mr. Stallworth.
Mr. Farmer, I really appreciate that, and but I do have a little bit of a concern when we talk about this and we're talking about that blue chip athlete. In our state, we know that less than 3% of all of our athletes even get the scholarships that you're talking about. So realistically, the viewpoint that I want to focus on is that if we're always just going to talk about that blue chip athlete, then we're making a policy and regulations based on 3% of our population. We need to make regulations and policies based on 97% of our students and what's best for those 97%. You know as well as I do out there that blue chip athlete is going to get a scholarship whether he goes to state championship his senior year or they only win 4 games. That kid's going to still get that scholarship. So we're talking about the majority of the kids that we're looking at that possibly transfer. Our office, Pam's office, and some of these other small schools, you know that there's only a handful of those types of blue chip athletes. But what about those other kids that are transferring? And the reality here is that what I don't want to do is create the same type of system that we have now. And that is we have a multitude of different policies which different kids could rotate and move and that kind of thing. I'm more in favor of, you know what, a kid can go wherever he wants to go. Have them go wherever they want to go, but they can't play varsity ball if they go there. They can't play varsity here, there, and everywhere. And what we can't do is have a free-for-all where kids go, well, I don't like this coach, or parents say, I don't like this coach, so I'm going to go over here, and just have them move to 4 or 5 different schools in a 4-year period and give them varsity eligibility. The chaos they're having on the college level right now is something that they cannot control. And if you look at the presidents, and if they had to do it all over again, and they could have foreseen what's happened with that system at the college level right now, it's absurd. And I got money that they would say, oh, no. We need to put more controls and stringence on what's going on. So I'm all in favor of a one-time transfer. And I'm also very much in favor of anytime you transfer, you can go wherever you want. You just can't play varsity level. And that takes the recruiting out of it. And that takes that element that a kid is always going to use, because what you're going to find out later is that this whole mental aspect and what's the best case scenario for the kids and all that, we'll have every kid in the country, every kid in the state's going to be saying, oh, mentally, I'm having issues with this coach. I can't play for this coach. I can't do that. Right, wrong, or indifferent, the reality here is that I'm in favor of this if they want to go. But every kid needs to understand that if you go and leave somewhere else and continue to move, that the only level you can play is varsity. I don't even think a kid needs to sit out 180 days. You just can't play varsity, and that will keep kids where they're supposed to be. Thanks. Sorry.
Thank you, Rollins. No, that's good. Yeah, Paul and I, our ears are sparking about sub-varsity all the time. Just keep on going. All right, I'm gonna. Yeah, go ahead, Paul.
And Rollins, just following up on that, you would be talking about sub-varsity eligibility the first 180 days, the first school year, when the student transfers.
That's how I understand.
You're muted, Rollins.
You know, I'm sorry. I'm you know, I'm kind of bent and stuck in the middle between the first time entry. But you know, I think that if we're going to give a first time entry to a student, any student that we have, then any time that student or other students after their freshman year want to go to some other school, they're just going to play JV level.
For the first year. Or always, what?
Yeah, that second year, I'm a freshman, I'm gonna not go to my zone school, and I'm gonna go to school Z, and I don't like it there. I definitely don't want to be able to go back to either my zone school or to another school and just automatically get varsity eligibility. That if I want to leave that school after my first year, even though I was given varsity eligibility and didn't play it, because you guys know that only 3 to 5% of those freshmen are going to actually play varsity level that first year. So if I go back to my zone school or go back to another school, I can play lower level eligibility is all I have for any sport.
But Rollins, what I want to understand, I understand exactly what you're saying, but I want to make sure you're saying it would be JV eligibility the first year that they transfer. So whether you're a sophomore transferring as a junior, you would be JV eligible only.
Exactly. That's
so
what
that would likely eliminate any transfer for a seat.
Do we have numbers on how many of our transfers get the sub-varsity application? Do we have the data on that? Like, what's the percentage of kids that are completely ineligible versus the kids that are granted sub-varsity?
I think Kate and Lori can probably tell you that.
Yeah, Kate, do you want to go first? And I'll have Lori. After Lori goes, I'm going to have her kind of go next, and we'll keep going down the list with Tammy and Todd and et cetera. But anyway, Kate, go ahead.
So coming from the public school perspective, I'm only handling public to public transfers. So in my office, it's an all or nothing. I don't have subvarsity for any transfer outside of a student that's coming on a variance. If they're first time on a variance, they get the subvarsity. Everybody else, if you're leaving a variance, if you're leaving a magnet program, you're just fully ineligible for magnet, anything that you participated in. So I don't have a subvarsity option, again, outside of that zone variance. But so for me, it's just the difference between if you're leaving a magnet program, then you are ineligible in any sport. You get the roster exception, any sport that you participated in. For 180 days, there's no subvarsity option. And then for a variance, if you leave, it's fully ineligible for a year with anything that you want to play. Doesn't matter if you played or didn't play. So that's my side.
Lori, are you able to try to think about percentages? Again, I'm putting you on the spot because I don't know what kind of data we can surmise from, but go ahead, Lori, if you would, please. Slots.
So I have more flexibility than Kate does, especially when I have all the transfers that are the same zone of attendance. And so all of those students, when they change those schools, they get the roster exception. And anybody whose name has appeared on a roster will get subvarsity. So the number of students that actually get a straight out denial is probably, I'm going to say less than 10%, and that's being quite generous. It's probably a lot lower than that.
Okay.
Rollins, does that change your mind at all? Just in regards to how many of the transfers aren't stopping just because the kids are not getting subvarsity? Does that make sense, or are getting subvarsity?
Lori, did you hear that?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that, Si?
I was more asking Rollins, like, does the numbers change your mind on all that, or does it reinforce what you were saying?
I think it definitely reinforces that the fact that if we have a base standard which regards to you play lower levels only and transfer, and you have the one-time chance to go your freshman year here, and you know it doesn't work out, you can go wherever you want, but the caveat is that you're going to play lower levels, and that person might even go to school C as a sophomore and be basically at his third possible school, and could actually go to another school his junior year and play lower level eligibility only.
Yeah.
But to me,
no
that,
appeal, right, Rollins?
pardon me?
With no appeal.
No appeals or anything. This is our rule, is that as a freshman, you can go wherever you want and play. And if you're good enough to play varsity ball, you're good enough to play. And then after that, you can go to 3 different schools in 3 years and play lower level ball. And you won't see that happening because kids aren't going to go to schools to go play lower level ball.
But we are in the private schools. I think Lori just demonstrated that with the numbers. We're
Yeah,
only
and-
seeing less than 10% are getting no eligibility, but we're still seeing kids come in knowing that they're going to play sub varsity.
And I would say that I agree with Rollins. I am in complete favor of student transfers, and they are automatically sub-varsity eligible. They register for the sport and activate, they're eligible. There's no transfer. They don't have to go get approved. They're automatically, that's it. They can do JV. I cannot count the number of times I've heard from schools when I'm trying to make a decision, hey, they only want JV, just give them JV. But I have to go through the process and read everything. I think that would eliminate a lot of headaches. There's still going to be those that are going to go, no, I want my varsity eligibility and still appeal. But I think that would eliminate a lot of confusion with schools, and I think it would help our coaches understand who gets eligibility as well.
Let me turn over to, thank you, Ms. Watts. Let me turn over to Mr. Anderson, and then I'll come back to the group here and kind of give you a show of hands if anybody else wants to make a comment on it. We'll try and exit this item here in just about 5 more minutes, just to at least make sure we touch on some other items. We got a lot to wrap up at the end, but anyway, Mr. Anderson.
So I like Rollins' idea from the standpoint that if you transfer, you get JV eligibility, but you don't get an appeal, because I can't tell this committee how many level 2s we've had this year and last year where that's exactly what the students got, but we fought an appeal because that's not good enough. And I can also tell you historically, we put that rule years and years and years ago to help the 97% Rollins. We had so many transfers, and we put the JV eligibility rule in to take care of the majority of them, and it worked for a while. And then everybody wanted varsity. So I think if the rule was specific and said you can transfer any year you want or whatever, it's only JV and there is no appeal period, that would be great. I think that would solve a lot of problems.
And sorry, Donnie Nelson, and then with that, Paul, clearly a change in residency from wherever around the state. And just make sure, because people are going to say
that goes to Kate's
about keeping
comments,
rules and regulations in place.
Yeah, early on here, and I do believe that that's a big part of all this that we just don't have enough time to touch on now.
No.
We have residency requirements and whatnot. So if somebody makes a legitimate move, then yes, I believe they should always be eligible.
Exactly.
New residents, public school. So
okay, I should just again. It seemed obvious, right? But until you say it, and people hear it, you make sure. Okay, Tammy, go ahead. I was going to call you next. Hands up, yeah. Tammy, go first, and we'll try and wrap this up here in a few minutes. Go ahead, and then Kate.
So, again, I always try to look at all sides of everything. Obviously, I think everyone on here has very drastically different experiences. You know, I too am very much in favor if you do the free for all. that we shouldn't have the one-time transfer as well. I'm kind of in favor of a one-time transfer. And I go back and forth on the varsity eligibility. Because I think we deal with a lot of problems that other schools maybe don't in other areas, whereas they deal with different issues we do. In your small towns, they don't have sub-varsity for majority of their sports. So their kids, they just don't get to play. You know, whereas we have issues where we have one school who will have 60 kids go out for their baseball team. And a school 3 miles away can't even field the team. So I look at, you know, do you want to save a program? Let some of those kids go there and play. You know, so I think there's a lot that goes into these, and I think it's hard to, and we're never going to obviously solve the world's problems and never going to make everyone happy, but what we deal with and what some of these smaller towns deal with is way different. Way different.
You know, Tammy, as you were talking, I just thought of something. Could a one-time transfer be set up instead of doing the first entry, a one-time transfer set up where those kids who are at those smaller schools decide, hey, I want my varsity eligibility right now, but I'm on a variance. And they can say, I'm going to use my one-time transfer now so I can get the varsity eligibility. And then you don't need the first entry because they still have that route.
That's more what I'm a fan of. I'm more of a fan of a one-time transfer and not the first entry. But I mean, there's pluses and minuses to a lot of it. I'm also very much a rule follower. So I understand, like, when Kate is saying things, you know, like there has to be rules for things. But I just know saving programs and doing what's best for kids. And like, I can't remember who said it, that they shouldn't be penalized for the zip code they live in. I totally agree, because there's some place, like, you just might live in the wrong spot that your kid may not make the baseball team because it's a 5A powerhouse, but 2 miles away, they would definitely save a program and play. So, I mean, I get both sides of it.
Thank you, Tammy and Lori. Let me go to Kate and then Reggie. And like I said, I do want to move on. We'll visit again this soon. We're not done. We're just discussing. So, Mr. Groy, go ahead, please.
I'll be really quick. I just wanted to kind of echo Rollins's point and kind of what Lori was just saying. I think there needs to be a marriage between the two so that all of the intended parties are addressed. You know, we really need to say, what is the intent of changing either of these? I know somebody brought that up, and I think that's a huge part. So, you know, if the intent is our smaller schools, I know one of our smaller schools here, they would like their zone variance freshmen to come in with full eligibility. So how do we marriage that to allow that to happen? So we have programs saved in those smaller schools, but then also not run into the one-time transfer, just full eligibility, where we're just going to have kids in our bigger schools just going, oh, I didn't get to play here, I want to go here, and try to mitigate having anybody taking advantage of the rules that we put in place. So I think there is, once we really narrow down like our intended parties and who we are trying to address and assist in this, that we can figure out a way of whether it be two different types of regulations or just adjusting the regulations that we currently have to allow full eligibility for a first time variance. And then maybe the sub-varsity, like Rollins was saying, I'm in full support of allowing full JV eligibility for any transfer. And I think in the public sector, and that's why he probably sees this, that's where a lot of our level 2s are coming from, is, you know, kids that are on a variance that decide to go to a different school or leave that school because they moved way far away and they don't want to go there anymore because it's just a lot of different issues, and you know, they don't get any eligibility. So I think we would benefit from a one-time sub-varsity rule that gives them, you know, a roster exception and sub-varsity, right? So they can play anything they didn't play at that zone variant school or that magnet program, just like we have with magnet, and they can get sub-varsity in anything that they did roster. And I think that would alleviate a lot of the public concern that we have in our public schools. So just my.
Mr. Farmer?
I had a question. I hope I held on to it. I had a question kind of based on what Rollins was saying. And then a comment for, I'm going to consider us a small school because we don't have sub-varsity in every sport here. We have a baseball program, softball program. Both are doing well. I'm going to say we made the playoffs in a 3 years of existence, but we don't have a JV program. So if we get a kid that's enrolled and he comes here from wherever and is accepted and wants to play baseball, what happens? If we don't have a sub-varsity, what happens to that kid? So I that's just something as we work through this, we gotta have to think about, like, small schools, charter schools that don't have yet, or may not ever have those sub-varsity programs. What do we do for that athlete? And back to what Rollins was saying, God dang it, I lost it again. It'll come back to me. It'll come. That's it.
We're gonna do this again. It's okay. All right, boy, see, you can understand the dynamics of all this we're talking about, and even states that are trying to do stuff don't have it figured out, so, but we're trying. All right, let's go, got 30 minutes to go here, and again, I know we're gonna continue this soon, we'll address that at the end. Page 17, into page 18, foreign students, and really, this goes to just the highlighted item on page 18, number 5. Currently, again, our I-20 students, I just use that as I-20, if they're not meeting residency requirements, they're not eligible. Paul, will you give us a quick synopsis, and then I just want everybody to have some input of, do we want to address this? Do we want to look at changing I-20s? And again, part of this could be also in relation to if we have a free one-time transfer varsity level, are we discriminatory against I-20 students then if we don't allow them to do a free-for-all? I'm way out of line here, I know, Paul, but go ahead if you would, please.
Okay, so the regulation that you see that everyone looks at when they're dealing with this issue online and whatnot is somewhat out of date, because back in, I think it's 2020, the NIA was sued by one of its member schools, a private school here in Northern Nevada that has a lot of I-20 students. You know, because under this rule, they weren't able to compete on an equal basis with other student athletes, you know, that were U.S. citizens or at least here and not on a visa. So when that lawsuit took place, what they asked for and what we ultimately amended this rule to say was basically that I-20 students are going to be treated. It was an equal protection argument, meaning they wanted equal rights to what goes on with any Nevada student. And we said, fine, we'll settle on that basis, which then required them to have a parent or guardian the NIAA would recognize under its rules, you know, in order to establish residency to attend. That has been the revision to the rule, and in effect is what Ms. Hobnick, who spoke in the public comment section, was addressing. Is in essence, those students are being precluded from participation because of the fact that they can't meet requirements. So the same regulation deals with our
J1s.
J1, yeah, foreign exchange students that are part of a recognized foreign exchange program. That rule has always been in effect to allow them their eligibility because of the safeguards that are in effect based on the program. The program only has those students here for at most a year. The program places the students somewhere, so there's no possibility of recruitment and that sort of thing. So they're different from an I-20 student who potentially could be a superstar athlete coming out of Europe, South America, or some other country somewhere. And we have seen that, and that has occurred in other states throughout the country. And that's why these rules exist, is a lot of these I-20 students that have come over are brought over by agents who, in essence, have them sign away rights that these students have ultimately obtain after high school when they go professional in sport from a financial standpoint. And so there was some abuse going on too. So part of these rules have been to protect those students. But our situation, where we are today is basically I-20 students don't have eligibility in that, because unless they can show the exact same requirements that a Nevada student would, and that's that they live legitimately in a zone of a particular school with a parent or legal guardian, et cetera. And, you know, if they're an I-20 student, likely they're not here because they have a parent here or a legal guardian. So.
Thank you, Paul. So a totally off the wall question is there a possibility of merging F1s to sort of like J1s and say, okay, you aren't here, but we'll give you a year? I've asked the committee, I have no idea where everybody wants to go with this. I'm lost with this one. Because there's positive, right? There are students who are I-20s who are at a school that are really here for benevolent reasons, right? They do want to experience American culture, and they're never going to have mom and dad move here. So there are those too, right? What's the percentage of the ones that are the superstars, and I don't mind saying it out loud, Tavenary cases that we dealt with, some of us will remember that from years ago, compared to those that really aren't, right? I don't know.
And I don't know what the percentage is, and I don't know what the answer to that is, because there's such a difference between those two types of visas. The I-20 student here can be here for an extended period of time, you know, several years as opposed to just the one. So I don't know.
You probably can't restrict somebody to 1 year on that visa because, right, you'd be discriminatory, I would guess.
What
right?
visa?
On an F1 visa or something like, or an I-20 student, right? You probably couldn't restrict that, say, all right, we're going to give you 1 year and that's it, because that's not what they're here for.
Then you're discriminating against them based on well, we can't do that based on that lawsuit.
Right, exactly. So, whew, anybody want to jump in on this, or we want to hold this for our next meeting? I don't see any hands. Anybody speak up real quick? I'm missing a couple hands.
I can just give a quick opinion.
Sure.
If it's about equity, I feel like the way that it's currently being implemented, it's not as written. They get full eligibility as long as they have guardianship and residency regulations met. That to me seems equal. Allowing them to be here with someone other than their parent would not be equal in my opinion, because then it would be looking at it like a temporary guardianship, and we don't allow temporary guardianship eligibility. So I think to be able to establish full eligibility, they have to meet those requirements as we've been doing it. So I don't think any change personally would be needed here.
Okay. Anybody else, again, in just discussion, anybody else in opposition of what Kate just said, which is in essence, keep the regulation as is? Anybody in opposition to that? Anybody want to go forward and look at potentially changing this to whatever degree that want to be? Just to look at changing. Anybody?
Well,
not an opposition, but a clarification if I could.
Yes, please, go ahead, Mr. Frederick, you go first, and then Mr. Stallworth. Yeah, go ahead, Si.
Yeah, I'm relatively new to this. So they, it is a sub-varsity approval only though, yeah? Like is that true or not for foreign exchange students who are living with guardians?
Well, that's what the old rule said, but basically because of the lawsuit, the I-20 students would be allowed to have full eligibility if they can establish it, I believe. And Lori or Kate, correct me if I'm wrong.
That's the proposed change, is what you're saying?
No, that is the existing law.
Yeah, okay. And so inside J1 or foreign exchange students are different. They do get their 1 full year, full varsity.
Si, where the confusion is the NAC that is on the website has not been updated by the LCB. So that old sub-varsity only language is still shown there, but that doesn't apply. They have to meet all the residency rules like everybody else.
You know, I don't want to change the subject too far, and I know that I agree with everyone on this particular issue. We don't have it that much in our district, but my guess is that it's coming. With that stated, I also think we need to make sure, and I know we're heading in that direction regarding some documentation and verbiage regarding CIT kids. And I think that needs to be addressed in this same platform that we're dealing with right now. So please please add that. I know I did see, I want to say it might have been a memo from Lori and Donnie regarding a new stance possibly with the NIAA and some verbiage with the from the NIAA regarding CIT and maybe lower level eligibility only as we move forward with that kind of a recommendation. I definitely support that with some possible follow-up investigative measures from our department to change that if they want to appeal that lower level eligibility only. So I just want to put that on record and make sure that we bring that up in the future.
Thank you, Mr. Stark. All right, anybody else? And if not, we'll jump off to item D. Okay. All right, let's go to page 19. This was introduced from Smith Valley High School principal a few board meetings ago, and it was with regards to, in essence, losing a particular program that had just previously, the year before, been very successful, and having students that wanted to play when their school couldn't offer that sport because their students couldn't go somewhere else and play that sport. So it was, if any school would agree with us, would we be able to combine our program with some other school's program? I was surprised. So on not this past, oh, it was this past Saturday. This past Saturday, I was fortunate to get quite a few of my colleagues around the West to join me for a meeting. I think Saturday is sometimes the only time we actually have a chance to sit down and talk with each other. So I was surprised about how many state associations actually have co-op programs, and they range from something very simple, like you see in option A and option B, to things that are incredibly complicated. Dear friends in California. And then there are some other policies that I didn't share with you, right? They're full regulations like Idaho and Washington are very straightforward. Montana and Colorado follow some straightforward things. New Mexico follows basically option A and or B that are pretty close. So with regards to co-op programs, the question is simply, number one, do we want to consider this, here in the near future? So if we do want to consider this, do we want to consider it at the small school level only, like 1A and 2A schools? That's kind of rich in option B. C, that the note is this is not intended for junior varsity programs to co-op, right? If you're going to have a junior varsity team, you might as well have a varsity team to play. And I guess D to that is if we do have co-op programs, the idea of those schools not being permitted to have postseason eligibility makes sense because we're not going to try and reclassify two schools like co-op to combine their enrollments to make them a class 2A, 3A, or 4A school. So again, just discussion number one, do we want to think about co-ops and do we want to keep this pretty simple? Anybody want to just raise their hand and talk about it? I don't have an order on this because this is something, co-ops are very brand new to all of us. We've never even considered.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, Mr. Wood, please.
So just thinking about our last league meetings that we had with the 2A soccer, in particular, is this something that you think would benefit that? I know there's a lot of discussion among my colleagues about the the scheduling and the smaller schools don't have JV teams, and so now we're trying to fill games and JV programs. The larger schools are trying to fill games. With this, I would definitely be interested in looking at something like this if that would help that situation.
Yeah, no, thank you, Mr. Wood. That's a great question. I don't know if you did hear about, would it help? We use the sport soccer, for example, because the 2A and 3A in the North are looking at, do we offer a 9-person type of soccer league to help those schools field teams? Because a lot of those teams they're dropping a little bit at the small school level where we're below the minimum requirement of 9 teams to have a state soccer championship in 2A because they've dropped, because they don't have 11, right? They have 7, 8, whatever. To answer your question, so the states that went real simple with language, kind of what you see here, was to put the burden on the schools that want to combine. And by having a non-postseason burden, they're attempting to find two things. One is, do schools want to even agree with each other to do that if they can't have postseason eligibility? Or would they rather just say, no, we have it, well, let's go forward, we want postseason eligibility or not? Number two, if schools do agree to do this, right, how do they transfer their students to practice? Because in Nevada, we're talking about 1A and 2A schools, we're spread out all over the place. Now, it's not to say that our 3A, 4A, and 5A metropolitan schools also are having problems fielding teams, so it might benefit them as well, and it'd be easier to find practice times. But the basis of it from the other state associations was, you know what, put the burdens on the schools, let them figure it out. The state association is doing a nice thing by saying your kids have an opportunity to play. Good luck. That's a pretty simple approach. I'm not sure it's the right one, and I'm not really sure how many schools would actually agree to do this. You know, I'll use an example. When Smith Valley came to the board meeting and brought this up about considering asking the board or the realignment, this rules, regulations, policies committee to consider a co-op rule, the school that they were going to ask to co-op said, you know, we're in the minimum numbers to hold that sport. It might help us, but no, because we'd rather play with the minimum number just to have that team so we can have postseason eligibility. We're not interested in trying to find ways to practice with you or play together or have uniforms or double check dually check eligibility, all that kind of stuff. It was really interesting. So I'm not sure there's any schools that actually would want to try and do this. But anyway, I'll open up to the floor. Anybody wants to have thoughts about should we consider it or not based on some simple language?
Donnie, did I hear you correctly in saying that this would also apply to 3A and 4A is what you said? So did you say that or no?
Thanks. I said it could certainly, we could always consider it to apply to 3A and 4A and 5A. Absolutely. We don't have to. Option B addresses 1A and 2A schools because perceptually, that's where the greatest problem has about schools trying to field teams in particular sports, right? You know, trying to field a football team at the 1A level right now is proving to be difficult for a lot of schools.
Because it largely has to do with
yeah, go ahead, Si.
It largely has to do with student body number, right?
In my opinion, yes, right. I think we saw probably a trend prior to the pandemic where we did see some larger enrollment schools that for whatever reason were not fielding lower levels, even though they're huge populations. And I don't know if that's right. We never did a case study on it. Was that because of lack of interested students to play, or was it demographics? I don't know.
I would suggest in that case, that's not on the state to help them field the team. That's on the school to help them field the team. They have the numbers to field the team. Now they've got to be able to figure that on their own or devise some different ways of doing that. Yeah, I think that's a different situation than a school that legitimately doesn't have enough kids enrolled in their school. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Right. And that's what option B goes to really is a class 1A, 2A design. Yeah, right. We do have schools that just don't have the student population even possible to have 5 boys on a basketball team. They're doing something else. So that's all. It was I'm not sure what the interest level is. Is the other interest level in this group? Just for me to bring back this again for discussion another time.
Donnie, the only thing I would say is if we do bring it back, I think I'm against what he just said is I don't think it should be limited to just the smaller schools because we have just as hard a time fielding some of these programs as they do. I feel like the only level right now that's consistently fielding programs is 3A. I think 1A and 2A are having problems, and I think 4A and 5A are having problems. I mean, we had to cut, I don't know how many girls B and JV programs this year for basketball in Clark County. The number was insane, and I know my school, we can never field a tennis team. We barely fielded a golf team for the first time in our entire existence. So, I mean, I think if we're going to say yes for the smaller ones, we should say yes for the bigger ones. And then I agree with you, let the schools figure it out. I don't think it's something the NIAA has to figure out.
So Tammy, I would guess that in this one that they wrote out is why they put certain sports in there. And
yeah.
The question for you would be like, what in your best estimate, what is the issue, do you think?
We have all been racking our brains. It gets worse and worse every year. It's predominantly our girls' sports. We've never not been able to field a level, and this year it's insane. Like our whole basketball program. Now I was able to field 3 barely, but they only have 2 games. My B team only got to play 2 games the whole season, and then I couldn't field a B flag football for the first time ever, which really didn't even matter because only 2 teams we played had a B. So I don't know. I don't know what it is.
Yeah. And Don Nelson again. So really looking at this, and we'll get into numbers about membership requirements and things like that. This is clearly not designed for the individual based sports of, let's go through cross country. It's not based on the individual sport of golf, boys and girls. Tennis has an individual side of it, but it's a team concept. So I'd leave tennis off of that a little bit maybe. Wrestling, right? You can still qualify individuals to a postseason, even if you don't have a team to score. And well, that's quite it. So track and field, right? This doesn't pertain to track and field. This doesn't pertain to swimming and diving.
So it's
that's why, yeah, you have schools that are, it's more team bracketed sports to be able to spot.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let me, again, you have some time to think about this before we meet again. So I will just bring it back and think about, right, do we want to write out option A, option B or not? I think we talked about it. All right, let's, we're wrapping down to 10 minutes here. And again, I want to get us back together here in a not too distant future to go over this again and really get more focused now that we know what the issues are and we've heard each other with some commentary. So go to page 20, if you would, please. And this is with regards for, I put the, the header realignment purposes. It's really more for membership purposes and defining a number of individuals that would be associated with a team. So a school could say, hey, to satisfy the requirement to have one boys sport or one girls sport per season, this is what it is. And not just, hey, we have boys or girls cross country, like I talked about at the introduction, with a couple of students. And this isn't designed to tell schools you can't have a cross country program, right? We don't want to do that. It's to say you can't use it. So I don't think I need to read any of this other commentary here, but it's the original numbers that you see on here are based on requirements to participate in the state academic team championships, to be eligible to have a team GPA. That's what the first number is for. The second number is what you really need to have a team score per se, right, in sports. So cross country, we do have 5, and it is 5 for scoring. Granted, I know at the 2A level you only have to have 4 to score, separate issue. Football, we actually have 15 on the academic side, but clearly if you have it's 11 for the 1A. But if you have 11 or you have 8, not that anybody would want to put a football team out there with no subs, because that would be insane. But why not that, right? On your registered roster of students that participate. Soccer, we have 12. Why not 11? That's what you play in soccer with. Tennis, it's 9. Why not 6? Because we actually have a policy in our handbook, our sport reference manual says if you have 6, you can count as a team and go play a team match. Basketball, right? We have 7, but why not 5? If you have 5, I guess all 5 stars can play all game and you'd be fine. Bowling, we have 6. Why not 4? Flag football, 7. Skiing, 6. Why not 4 or 5? Depending on Tahoe Basin League and Northern Nevada, Northern Region League. Wrestling, 7 is an identity to half of the weight classes. Baseball, 9. Softball, 9. Those match up. Swimming and diving and track and field, we have 7 and 9 respectively. We came up with those numbers for academic championships because those are one half of the individual events that are offered in those sports respectively. So it takes out the relays. We have 18 events in track and field that are individual based. That's where 9 came from. 7 for 14 individual based events for swimming and diving. So anyway, this may not be that complicated to say, hey, as we get our membership committee together, that we do look at these numbers and make sure a school can field it to be able to claim it for satisfying membership purposes. Open to comments. Hopefully that all makes sense. Mr. Davis, I know you're on there, you're not on the committee, but I'm going to chime in on you because, again, I know you are dialed in on things of this very nature. So if you wouldn't mind, just do these numbers make sense to you? Are we trying to make too much of it? I don't know, but something we got to talk about.
Yeah, we're trying to make too much of it because somebody's going to make the argument that I've got the best golfer in the state and it's the only kid I've got. And that kid's going to go win 3 or 4 state titles. And you're telling me I don't have a golf team. And that part of it, I think, is going to be a little bit rough. We've seen it with tennis where we've had teams that have 3 or 4 kids, but they've got the right 3 or 4 kids that they could go win a singles championship and a doubles championship. I get what we're trying to do here, but I don't really want to get too deep in the can of worms with 6 minutes left in the meeting either. There are certain sports where you have to have certain numbers to play. There are others, if you've just got individuals, do we want to hold it against a school if they get the best kid in town and nobody else? I mean, that's a little rough.
Well, I don't think we have a system set up that if Tiger Wood went to Hug, he's the best golfer, but Hug only has one golfer, and that's Tiger Woods. I don't think we don't let Tiger Woods participate in the state championship.
Right, exactly.
So we're not going to punish the one kid that's the great golfer, but we are going to require that school not to be able to count golf as one of their major sports when they only have Tiger Woods there for 4 years and then he's gone. They don't have anyone. So we want them to get 6 sports, 2 each for every sports season. And then if they happen to have the one golfer that doesn't count in that list of 6, then we're good to go and he plays. So
No,
what we don't want is the one golfer counting as one of the 6 teams to meet the qualifications of the application.
fully understand that, Mr.
Okay,
Stallworth.
that's
I-
all.
Yeah. I just
don't
kind of,
want, I just don't want the Tiger Wood out there who's listening or parents who are listening saying, oh, well, my son could never play golf at this school because he's the only golfer. I don't want to give anyone that perception.
no, I get that fully, and I appreciate the constructive on that. I just also look at it as, what kind of argument are we getting ourselves in with a school who says, what do you mean we don't have a sport that they just hung a banner on their wall for? Because the kid won a championship in it. I don't know how deep we need to get into this. I love the idea that, and I want to enforce the idea, because we've got a number of schools out there right now that, if you look hard and fast at the requirement, really aren't meeting it. Much like has been said in this meeting, I'm a rules person too. I don't know how much trouble we get ourselves in with this unless it's going to be something we can definitely enforce all the way across.
Yeah, Mr. Anderson, go ahead.
So just briefly, I think what Donnie mentioned earlier, that this is probably more of an issue for membership than it is for realignment or the participation of a team at state or regionals or whatever. I think we do have to have a minimum number to determine what a team is because of the number of small school memberships that we get where they don't meet the requirements of one boys sport, one girls sport in each season. We still have to be able to say what a team is. And I think that's been the position of Ms. Sloan and others on the board for some time in terms of that whole issue. So I think they are separate as I think you're saying, Mr. Davis. But I think we do need to have some sort of definition so that we can address our membership part of this.
Okay, and that's at the very top of the page. I put, team, right? A group of players forming one side in a competitive game or sport. I think that's a dictionary thing, but in our regulations, the team, right, which we use, you got to have a team per season sport, right? We don't have it defined, and I don't know if we need to do this by numbers if this becomes our definition of team for membership purposes. Again, I knew we'd take a little while in the first few, so I don't mean to fly by these because I want us to get back together here soon. And we can probably pick up with these last 3 and then circle back the other ones in our next meeting and decide where we want to go. So last couple things I've gotten here. One is the post-game bench clearing. I'll just touch on this briefly because we can do this next time. My question is pretty simple, right? Do we want to amend bench clearing to say if one team has already won the game, then they don't lose that victories in the bench clearing? I'm not saying that they don't get penalized for the next game. I'm saying they don't lose the victory that's been established. And that's really a basis of some schools asking, hey, Donnie, what if we lose and we just don't want that to be a win for them? We're just going to go fight, right? I'm being a little facetious, but it's not out of the realm. We're just going to go run over that bench and we're going to go at it. And you know what? As soon as they leave that bench, as soon as they step onto the court or off the sideline, they've engaged, right? That's what our rule is. You have more than 3, so why wouldn't we do it? So I'm trying to think about how we save if we can. But if we do consider something like that and we save the victory for our team, does that also mean that we have to have some kind of a bench clearing appeal process, right? What if in the postseason, quarterfinals of the football regionals, team wins, game's over, right? We have this. They're in the handshake line. The other team says, you know what? We just don't want you to go forward. We're going to start throwing punches right then and there in the handshake. Well, guess what? They're off the bench. It is still in the post game, which you can see in our regulations on page 23 exists. And then all of a sudden, not only forfeited, making a double forfeit, but that team doesn't get to go on to the region semifinals for football because they've just engaged in a bench clearing. So there's 2 parts to this, right? One is, do we want to consider saving the victory? And number two, do we want to consider having an appeal process that a team who said, hey, we were aggrieved, we didn't want to fight, we just got attacked, get a committee together and look at it and see if we can still go on the next week. Let's say this for another, but you can see there's some pretty two real difficult things to think about. Let's attack this in our next one. We'll come back and attack. I said that tongue in cheek. And the last one I just want you to be aware of again is on page 24, and that's regards to a hardship defined. I mentioned earlier, that's all we've got. And based on our public comment, mental health, a public proposal to amend 024. Not saying we do want to. I just want you to make aware of this. I want you to, again, we'll come back and talk about a hardship again in our next meeting. So here's how I want to end it today. Future planning. This is item number 7. I'm thinking about we might need a chair for this committee. With all due respect to this committee and the association, certainly I'm departing in the not too distant future, and I want this. This is an incredibly important committee. And within our staff, we selected all of you on purpose, right? You each represent a specific area that really serves the association well. And you can tell by the opinions and the commentary and the dialogue we've had amongst each other. I think we've got just a wonderful group right here, a committee. I think we're well represented by all of you that are on. But I do want to consider if somebody would like to take over being the chair of this committee, that would be much appreciated. You don't have to answer that question right now. If you want to email me or send me a text or give me a phone call, go, Donnie, I would like to put my name out there to chair this. Not that I won't continue to work through this person through the remainder of my term, and not that the next executive director certainly would want to also continue to be very deeply involved in this, because this is NIA staff, NIA staff stuff. So anyway, if you want to be a chair, make contact with me. If not, we can certainly have a staff person serve as a chair. I know of a couple people on staff that could certainly do it as well. But second part is, I think we need to meet virtually again, and I think we need to meet sooner than later. And from that second virtual meeting, we could certainly lead us into other things, maybe even as grand as we have a few more meetings, and then we get together at the NIA Board of Control meeting in spring in person. That's March 19th and 20th. Again, we're not there yet to say let's meet in person, but we'd only have a few people traveling because that means in the South. Most of this committee is based in the South, so the NIA wouldn't be at a huge expenses to meet in person. But I think we need to meet sooner than that. So with that, what do we think about meeting in? I want to be cognizant of everybody's calendars as we start class. Meeting in two weeks from today, another Thursday, maybe start at 1:30. Give us to go from 1:30 to 4. 2 weeks, that is February 9th. Is that what it is? See, that's the second. Yeah, February 9th, I think, is a Thursday. Am I right on that? I'm sorry, I don't have my calendar in front of me.
The 8th.
The 8th.
Yeah, there it is.
The Friday.
Yeah. So what do we think about meeting again? Or is that waiting too long? I mean, do we want to meet next week? I'm up for anything at this point. Paul, your calendar is most important, probably everyone here.
Calendar, but go ahead and set it and I'll do whatever I want to do.
Okay.
I can't do February 8th.
I'm sorry, Sai, go ahead, please.
I can't do February 8th.
Okay. Is there another day during the week that's better, like a Wednesday, the day before, like the 7th? It doesn't have to be on a Thursday. I just threw that out. I know we've got games and all kinds of things still going on, right? You got a game on the 7th, okay? Tuesday the 6th. I mean, I know we got games all over the place. We're trying to get done before games. Obviously, you can still be virtual, Joe, too. Yeah. Right, don't have to be in person with this. So, any thought? Anybody want to throw a date out there? I'm thinking, like I said, I'm thinking basically a week and a half to 2 weeks away, just to give us time to process all this stuff. And not that the packet's going to look any different, to be very honest. I just think once we meet again, we can really have, okay, Donnie, let's go after this, let's go after this, let's go after that. And let's start creating some regulations again. I'm not trying to postpone this. We need to act probably pretty quickly. So again, what do we think about then Tuesday the 7th? 6th? Tuesday the 6th, right?
Good for me.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, Tuesday the 6th, okay.
Yeah.
And is 1:30 too early? Based on all of you being in the building, is 2 o'clock better, or is 1:30 okay? I think we only need 2 hours. I think we can really get focused with the last few items.
Earlier the better for me.
Earlier the better?
Yeah,
So,
1:30 is fine for me.
1:30? Okay. Go like 1:30 to basically 3:30? Okay. Okay, let's do that then. Let's plan on that right now. That's February 6th, Tuesday. We'll come back, dive deeper into what we did here decide what kind of direction we want to go. And again, if somebody wants to help to chair it, again, outside of staff, let me know. All right? All right, with that said, public comments. Let me read this real quick here. Tia, I know you're still listening. Do you want me to read this public comment, Paul, or just ask Tia if we have any comments?
You can ask if you have any comment, if you do, then.
Okay, then I'll read it. Okay. Tia, have you received any public comment?
No, I have not.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else listening in? Any public comment? I'm gonna check my email right now. Oops. I'm back. There we go. I'm checking my emails right now. No, okay, nothing on my end. So with that, then I don't need to read public comment then. Let's, at that point, let's adjourn. Got 4:07 on the clock, and we'll look forward to getting back here on Tuesday, February 6th at 1:30. I'll send you out, again, we'll send out the zip code and all that. Think about all we talked about.